episode 26 of the Hilo Stitch podcast. I am your host, Kristen, and I am here to talk to you about what else? Knitting. I will also be talking about knitting pattern design, other goings-on in the fiber arts community, and as usual, there's a good chance I may mention Diego Luna at some point for absolutely no good reason. So thank you so much for joining me today. A special thank you to my Patreon patrons for supporting the podcast, and a special welcome to any new viewers who are checking out the podcast for the first time. So if you don't know me already, I'm Kristen Janik. I am a knitting pattern designer and a knitting instructor. I live in Maryland with my very tall husband from Peru and my two small boys. And when I'm not knitting, I enjoy vegetable gardening, drinking wine, Orioles baseball, but it is mostly about the knitting, so let's go ahead and start talking about it. So here we are. The school year has started. Things are underway. Parents of children, especially small children, I'm sure are feeling much the way that I am, which is exhausted and wondering when this delightful situation might come to an end. In Maryland, all of the public schools are online only. So my kids are at home. They are in second grade and kindergarten. The second grader is doing pretty well. He doesn't need a lot of supervision. He mostly stays focused on his work. The kindergartner is another story. He needs a lot of supervision because if he doesn't get it, then he'll just wander off. Even when being forced to sit for his Zoom classes, he's not paying much attention. He can turn anything into a toy. So it is like a full-time job. He also has some sensory issues, and so other kids yelling, particularly high-pitched yelling or crying, that really sets him off. And there are a couple of kids in his class who are not great at keeping the microphone, muted when they haven't specifically been called on, and who are loud and a bit screechy. And we've been trying really hard to remember that if a classmate is being loud or making a noise you don't like, you should cover your ears, not you get up, run away, scream, cry, and throw a temper tantrum. But more often than not, he is doing the latter, at least several times a week, and it takes quite a bit of energy to get him to calm back down and refocus. So the good news is that in terms of what he's learning and what he's supposed to be doing, he knows that stuff. He knows his letters. He can read because he's nonverbal. It's hard to tell that he can read. I don't want to say he's nonverbal. He is verbal, but for a bunch of reasons, it is very hard to understand him. I understand him 90% of the time. So I'm also kind of being an interpreter for him, for his classes. But in terms of the academic stuff, he's right where he should be. It's everything else that he has difficulty with. And unfortunately, what he really needs the practice with is, classroom behavior. And instead, he's getting this, Zoom behavior, which is a very different thing. But we have survived the first 3 weeks of school. We are supposed to be virtual only until at least the end of January. Our governor, 3 days before the new school year started, announced that he wanted schools to re-examine that policy and try to start schools in person after the first quarter. And, I certainly agree with everybody that classroom learning is the best when it's possible. But as long as it is not possible to learn in the classroom safely, we make do with what we've got. And what we have is virtual learning. And 3 days before the school year starts, it's not, after districts have spent all summer trying to come up with these distance learning plans, for him to suddenly announce 3 days before the year started that he wasn't in agreement with that, it's very frustrating. So I expect the kids to be at home at least until the end of January. Should the schools change their policy, I'm not sure what we would do about that, but for now, this is where we are. So my sister is going to try to come down once a week to help out. On Wednesdays, the kids have a half day. That is, they have formal class in the morning and in the afternoon, and we're supposed to be doing sort of independent study and things like that, because parents just don't have enough on their plates at this point. So she's going to be trying to come down on Wednesday mornings. The good news is that she has experience in behavioral therapy, so she can be helpful for the little one. But yeah, I am just a very tired person at this point. It tends to happen rather early in the morning, sometime between 9 and 10, that if my youngest, Ollie, is going to have one of these, is going to be set off by one of these loud kids. It tends to happen very early in the morning, and then after, I finally get him settled and refocused, I'm already exhausted for the day, and, it's not even lunchtime, so it is what it is. We want to keep safe. I hope you are all staying safe. I hope parents are handling the distance learning as best they can, and are handling just being constantly surrounded by their children as best they can. It is a challenge, particularly with nothing really to look forward to in the near future. Rhinebeck, has been canceled. I should be celebrating a rather big birthday this year, next month, and that's, not really possible. So these are certainly trying times, and I hope everybody is dealing with it the best they can, and it is somewhat reassuring to know that the rest of us are right there with you. So in terms of any kind of social activities or personal time, I feel like there's so much on TV. I'm not running out of things to watch, but I'm finding it really hard to navigate what to watch because so much just like junk seems to be getting thrown up. So we were watching Outlander. So we watched the first 4 seasons. We can watch the 5th season, but I just started the 5th book. I'm, maybe 20% tops done. So I really don't want to start that next season until I finish the book. So I've just been really trying to find things on Netflix to hold my attention and get a break from the realities of the world and the fascist in the White House. Yet for some reason, what I spent most of the last week watching was Roger Stone's Untold History of the United States. It's very interesting. It ends sort of toward the end of the Obama presidency, and I just wonder what it would have been like had he done any episodes since Trump. It is definitely a more leftward leaning program. You can definitely see some some leftward bias there, but the facts that he presents, are still facts. So how you interpret them may differ. What lessons you learn from them may differ, but it really is an interesting program. So if you have Netflix, I would definitely spend some time watching that so you can, learn about other fascists and how history just keeps repeating itself. And then the other thing is I've been watching Boy Meets World on Disney Plus. That was one of my absolute favorite shows as a young teenager. I had a very big crush on Ryder Strong, who plays Sean. Still a big fan of Ryder Strong. He has a podcast called Literary Disco, where he talks about books with two friends of his. I really haven't listened to it in a while because I hardly have any time for reading. But I'm still a big fan of his. And just going back to these sort of, lighthearted TV programs that brought me so much joy as a teenager it's a little bit of a nice break. It's also the reason that I tend to rewatch Sabrina the Teenage Witch relatively frequently. My taste in TV shows is maybe not the best. Like documentaries, you can probably count on me, but when it comes to other things, I have odd tastes. We also recently started watching a TV show about tacos. Netflix has an entire series about tacos called The Taco Chronicles, just talking about different kinds of tacos. And I like tacos, so why not? My husband and I have a really hard time finding anything that we're both interested in watching. For a while we watched Ancient Aliens because it's just so batshit that it's wonderful to just get mutually irate and yell at the television about how ridiculous they are. But as it turns out, there's not that much to the ancient astronaut theory, so the episodes start to get really repetitive. So we haven't watched that in a while. But now we have, the taco show. My husband does want to start watching the next season of Outlander, so he's really annoyed that I'm taking so long to read the 5th book. I'm actually not. I was reading a book before that, and it was in Spanish, so it takes me a little bit longer to read. And so I actually just maybe 2 weeks ago started the 5th book. And so the book I read before that was El Largo Pétalo del Mar by Isabel Allende. Not one of her absolute best, but definitely interesting and sort of right up my alley. In terms of fiction, I tend to really be interested in historical fiction, and so this book begins during the Civil War in Spain and goes all the way through the Pinochet regime in Chile. So that's the 1930s through the late 1980s, late 1980s, I think. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly when Pinochet was knocked down. So not one of her best, but or not one of my favorites, but definitely worth a read. I'm sure it's available in English as well. So we're not allowed to, go anywhere, do anything. So I don't have anything more interesting to talk about than the few books I've managed to squeeze in and the lousy TV shows that I'm watching. So it sounds like maybe it's time to start talking about some knitting. Okay, so in this episode, I do have a couple of pattern drops for you, or one pattern drop and one pattern reintroduction. So let's first talk about the reintroduction, and that is that I have released the new version of the Jaji pullover. So I'll go ahead and pop a couple of photos in here. And now I can just kind of show off the finished sweater right here. So this, I originally, it's a beautiful day, so the windows are open and the airplanes are loud. I originally published the Jaji pullover, I thought it was at the end of 2019, but I'm It's actually with the very end of 2018, I think. Where does the time go? As a men's sweater in my ebook, Juntos Knits for Togetherness, which was a book of patterns for either moms and kids or dads and kids. So I originally published it as a men's sweater with a kids version. And since then, I've gotten a lot of comments from women who also liked the pattern, but the men's version only had 5 sizes. And so I decided to go ahead and redo it to make a women's version. So now the pattern has been redone. It now includes 10 sizes, as well as instructions for knitting both the men's version and the women's version. So the women's version has shorter sleeves, shorter body length, shorter armhole depth, and closer fitting sleeves. And then the placket at the front is also a little bit shorter. And so then, of course, the men's version has longer dimensions for all of those things and looser fitting sleeves. So for the women's version, it is still supposed to be kind of a bit oversized. There's no waist shaping. It is a drop shoulder, so it has kind of this casual fit. And I would recommend about 4 to 6 inches of positive ease. But I kept the body, fairly short, so it hits kind of at the top of the hip. And I still made the sleeves closer knitting, so it's sort of a grandpa style sweater, because that's what Jaji means. It's grandpa in Polish. But it's not, it's not super oversized. You're not going to be swimming in it as you might have if you had just knit the men's version. So now that the original pattern includes 10 sizes, both women and men, and a kid's version, you can knit these for your whole family. So the yarn I used for the women's sample is Blue Sky Fibers wool stock, which is just a Peruvian Highland wool. So it's not merino, so it's not the softest wool you ever felt, but it is very comfortable to wear. It is nice and warm. This is a really reasonably priced. I believe it's around $8 a skein, and it's 123 yards per skein. So nothing, nothing super fancy, but it comes in some nice, lightly heathered colors. So this one is called like purple lilac or something kind of obvious like that. And they, all of their colors are just, solid or almost solid. And there's, plenty going on with the stitches in this pattern, so you really don't want a whole lot going on with your yarn. I opted for a tubular cast on, so it's knit from the bottom up. But in the pattern, I just wrote a regular cast on. It's easy to substitute if that's what you want to do. I definitely encourage you to make those kind of decisions for your own knitting projects. Swap out your cast-ons and your bind-offs and learn what works best with what. So that pattern is now available on Ravelry, on PayHip, and on Love Knitting. And on both Ravelry and PayHip through the end of September, you can save 15% on the pattern price with the code SweaterWeather. All right, so that's the first pattern reintroduction. And then I have a little pattern drop, and that is that I have a new accessory pattern in Interweave Gifts. So I will pop a photo in here again. Interweave Gifts is the issue that they release sort of a few months in advance of the holidays, so you can start all your gift knitting, and it's full of small projects that maybe you would like to gift. So these are a pair of pretty simple collarwork mittens. The pattern includes 3 sizes. It is knit with Harrisville Designs, whatever the fingering weight yarn is. It's a magazine. Again, they didn't have models for this. I know that they do have models for their upcoming what was that? Winter issue, I think. Something that I that I have a pattern in because I saw it. It must be the winter issue. So here's another photo of the mittens. Harrisville Design Shetland. I knew that. So that's a fingering weight. Let's see if I'm correct that it has 3 sizes. The thing is that these are really cute. These aren't mine, but these are really cute. So check that out too. Those are by Erica Mount. The thing is that we do these things so many months ahead of time that I just kind of forget about them. And in this case, I had a sample knitter knit the actual mittens, so I remember even less about them. Okay, yes, it has 3 sizes, so 6.5, 7 3/4, 8 3/4 hand circumference. It's knit with the Harrisville Designs Shetland. Just need 1 skein of each. The colors, oh no, it's in 3 colors. So as I was saying, it's knit in 3 colors. Wow. So, yeah, I forgot that. So you can see kind of in the mittens that there are actually 2 shades of gray that kind of fade in and out and 1 of the blue. You could easily do it in 2 colors. It just gives a little more depth to have sort of 2 similar colors, like these 2 kind of grays, and then a contrast color. And then the thumb, is picked up from some waste yarn that's put in there. So these are sort of that kind of folk shape mitten in Interweave Knits Gifts, which is, I assume, already on newsstands since I have a copy of it. You can also purchase the digital edition directly from their website, and of course I will include a link to that in the show notes. So what they call these mittens, I want to say, is it's another thing, magazines usually rename your stuff. So I don't remember what I called them originally, but they are now called the Phlox Flower Mittens. So that is a new mitten pattern available for now exclusively through Interweave Knits. You can buy the digital edition online, or you can wait until about a year from now, and then I will re-release it as an individual pattern available in one of my pattern drops. So those are my pattern drops for this month: new and improved Jaji pullover and Phlox Flower Mittens in the Interweave Knits Gifts edition. So do I have new yarn to share with you? Of course I do. As I had previously announced, though, I'm going to be retiring from design at the end of the year, and so all of that yarn support yarn, that's going away. And so from now on, most of the yarn I show you is going to be yarn that is presumably for me to knit things for myself. So I do have a couple of yarns to show you this time. The first is, I have been looking at the Ursa pattern by Jacqueline, something I'm going to mispronounce, but I'm going to go ahead and put it here with the photo. So I really like this pattern. It looks really easy to wear, kind of goes with everything. The only thing I don't like about it is that it is knit with a bulky weight yarn. I recently knit a sweater, a design with bulky weight, or maybe even super bulky yarn. It was just miserable for me. I don't like knitting on needles bigger than around 9, 10, if absolutely necessary. It just hurts my hands. The project gets so heavy. It's just not for me. So I've been looking at this and thinking maybe I would go ahead and knit it with a little bit of a lighter yarn that might require a little bit of math to rework to get it to be my size. But I still wanted to do kind of like a worsted Aran weight, so it wouldn't be a major change. Hopefully, ideally what I would do is knit perhaps 1 size up from what I would usually knit, and then just keep an eye on my lengths so that it wouldn't end up being, have the body too long or the sleeves too long, knitting the larger size. I haven't looked at it that closely yet. It's just theoretically, that's what I would do. So I recently needed to buy a couple of skeins from Knit Picks for something else, and I decided to go ahead and buy yarn for my Ursa. So I went ahead with their City Tweed Heavy Worsted or slash Aran. It says Aran slash Heavy Worsted. So this colorway is, I want to say Snowbank. It is Snowbank. I've used a really similar color before in my Mr. Postman sweater. So I'll kind of pop that in here. This colorway, I don't remember. I'm sorry, this is like itching me. I don't remember what the original colorway that I used for that sweater was. You can see it's a little bit warmer. This is a little bit cooler. So it's more of a white, maybe a little gray, but then it still has the tweed flecks that are black and some sort of this camel color in here. So it's, again, you know, it's called Snowbank, obviously. So it's more of a snowy color. It's just a little bit cooler. I think it's going to work really nicely for my Ursa. So this is 164 yards a ball, and I got 4 balls. And based on my reading of the Ursa pattern, that should be plenty. And this will be a really nice project for me. It should still knit up pretty quickly with the heavy worsted Aran weight yarn. Again, I don't know how much recalculating I'm going to have to do. I hope it's going to be not too much. I hope, like I said, maybe knitting a bigger size and keeping an eye on the lengths might do it. If not, I have a little bit of experience with pattern map, so it shouldn't be a major problem. The other thing is, though, I recently looked at something on, I think Instagram, on Jacqueline's Instagram, and maybe it was a bit of a teaser, but it seemed like she might actually be making a lighter weight version of the pattern. If that's the case, I'm being really annoyed with myself, but we'll just have to wait and see. So that is yarn for my Ursa sweater. That is not on my Make 9 for this year. My Make 9 for this year is basically a bust. More on that another time. So not planning to cast on right away anytime soon, but I think maybe this is going to be my, I don't want to say celebration project, but maybe my, hey, I'm done designing and now I can do more selfish knitting project that I cast on after I finish my last design. We'll see. So got yarn for an Ursa sweater for myself. And then when the school year was about to start and I was just feeling really overwhelmed with, you know, how much I'm gonna have to be putting into schooling for the next few months, I decided that I deserved a little treat. So I did a little bit of yarn shopping for myself and bought some very fallish yarns. So these 2 skeins recently arrived in the mail. These are from Essence of Autumn. That's the name of her shop, so she must love autumn as much as I do. She is a Canadian-based indie dyer. And they are 2 very fallish skeins. So this one is a sock yarn. The colorway is called October. You just see kind of the fall leaves in there and the bright sun and it's just a little bit of everything in there for October. Love that. And then this one is called Autumn's Essence. This is a worsted weight. Not 100% sure what I'm going to do with this, but you can see this is kind of purples, browns, golds. So this is maybe a little bit more traditionally autumny. And maybe I might be combining this maybe with a solid color somewhere in my stash for maybe a brioche project or something like that. As usual, when we're stashing, I have no exact plans for either of these yarns, but I love that they are just gorgeous little fall treats for me. So Essence of Autumn, I will be sure to link that in the show notes as well. Check her out. I got these at an off time, She does do shop updates, and these just happen to still be in her shop. But she has some of them, you know, some of these beautiful colors that fly right off the shelves. As soon as she does the update, I just didn't have the patience to wait for them, but you definitely want to check that out. So more yarn in the stash for unknown projects. All right, for Adelante in this episode, I wanted to show you guys the progress I had made on this 2-color worsted weight shawl that I had showed you a couple of times, barely started. I really wanted a chance to show you the progress because I finally was able to get enough projects off the needles that I could combine 2 cables and really show off this whole shawl. So this shawl still doesn't have a name, but it is probably on tap for sometime in October. I am opening it up for preview knitting, so if you've got 2 to 3 shades of worsted weight yarn in your stash, maybe you want to volunteer. So what I'm using here is Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, that's the blue. I believe it's Almanac. And then I'm using 2 different colorways of Spin Cycle Yarn's Dream State. That is definitely a pricey yarn. That was a weird way to say yarn. But Knit Picks has sort of a pretty similar substitute, which is their Chroma Twist Worsted. So definitely check that out. But if you're not familiar with the Dream State, it's a sort of barber pole style, hand spun style yarn that sort of the colorways make a gradient when it's knit up. So this starts out pretty simple, you know, some stripes, some garter stitch stripes, some slip stitch, eyelet bands, and then we get into sort of the heart of the pattern. This is a stitch called Pearl Brioche, P-E-A-R-L. And so what I'm doing here is using the Spin Cycle yarn in the background, and you can see the colors change as the little blue dots kind of crisscross over it. This is of course unblocked. This is going to be much nicer, I think, once it's blocked. And so I'm going to do, I think, 1.5 more repeats of this, get out of the way, of this Pearl Brioche here. And then I am going to add a couple of lateral braids, Vickle braids, and finish it up with some Fisherman's Rib. Maybe add some tassels. I feel like this could be a tassel-y project, but I want to see how much yarn is left. So again, this is a worsted weight shawl. I am using, let's see, 2 skeins of the Shelter and then 2 skeins of the Dream State. So I think it comes out at about 300 yards of each color. Well, I say each color, but that's not what I mean. 200 yards of a main color, which is blue, 300 yards of the main color, which is blue, and then 300 yards of the contrast color, which in this case is 2 different colors of the Dream State. So should be under 600 yards total. And once it is blocked, this should be a nice big and cozy shawl for the coming cool weather months. I'm not a super fast brioche knitter, so that part is slowing me down a little bit, but it is just about done. And I'm really liking the way it's turning out. I've never been a big lacy shawl person. I tend to like colorful shawls, and I really like sort of a heavier shawl. So progress is being made on that, and it should be definitely by the end of October, if not before that. And then the other project I am still slowly but steadily working on, I really kind of was working to finish up the Jaji pullover, so that's why this project is not moving too swiftly, is my 6 Crooked Highways cabled drop shoulder pullover. So I'm nearly done this sleeve. I know the sleeve looks thin, but because of the way that these little slip stitch cables are done, this is very flexible, because it's almost like a a ribbing. So that's definitely going to block out and bloom and open up a little bit more. So I'm nearly finished one sleeve. This is now in preview knitting, and this is also going to, I'm going to get this out at the very, very end of September. That is the plan. We shall see. September is very rapidly escaping me. Probably because I spend most of my days sitting in my son's room yelling at him to pay attention to the computer. But it's just the sleeves that need to be done. The pattern is done. It has been tech edited. My preview knitters are well underway. So as usual, it's just me being behind on the sample again. It's time for another UFO invasion. This is where I show you some poor project that has been sitting in my whip basket for most of the time years. That is just languishing, and I want your advice. Should I finish it or frog it? All right, so this time we have my long-suffering hitchhiker. Oh, with, sorted random threads. I have no idea when I started this. Absolutely none. It's definitely been years. I am using this a big honkin'. This is, let's see, Riften from Jill Draper Makes Stuff. This is 600 yards of US grown wool. That's all it says. It's a very rustic yarn. It is a single ply. You can see it is a gradient. So it started way back here with this sort of dusty rose color into red, brown, and now it's getting into a yellow, and then it's gonna kind of do the same thing again until the end. Like I said, I have no idea when I started this. I haven't really made that much progress, so I have no idea where I left off. Let's see. This really doesn't say what weight this is. Now the hitchhiker pattern, which miraculously is actually in this project bag, now part of it is. Does it say? Yeah, I only printed out like the second and third page, so I don't remember what yarn this originally called for. I am knitting this on, let's see, US 2.5 millimeter needles. So what is that, like a 2.5 or large 2/small 3. So presumably this was supposed to be fingering weight yarn. This is really not. It seems really dense. I don't know. I mean, I like the gradient, but I really just feel like the fabric is too dense. I mean, of course it's not blocked, but and I didn't swatch for a garter stitch shawl. So, I mean, blocking is going to loosen it up this way a little bit, but not much the other way. And just, it feels like maybe it's a little too dense. I don't know. What do you think? Finish it or frog it? I really wish I knew when I had started this, but it was definitely, I remember buying the yarn at a Rhinebeck many years ago. It's just been, I'm not even sure where I left off in the pattern. It's it's a very simple pattern. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so it's an 8-row repeat. I don't know. ambivalent about it. I don't have any other plans for the yarn. I don't really need these needles particularly because these are my carbons, and for the most part now I just use my Chow Goose. I don't use these very much. And incidentally, that's I really like the carbons themselves, but the joins on the interchangeables are not great. So I don't. They're rough, and it's sometimes hard to get the yarn over them. So this would be sort of a really nice, heavy, rustic style shawl. I don't know. So please share your opinion in the comments about my long-suffering hitchhiker that I may or may not be knitting on needles that are too small. Finish it or frog it. All right, now that the weather is getting cooler, most episodes I'm hopefully going to be wearing a hand knit, and so I'm going to take a quick break and tell you what it is. So today what I'm wearing is my Annapolis pullover. This is my design. This was published many years ago in Holla Knits, which is a now defunct magazine. This sample was knit in a cotton yarn. I believe this is Kotlin from Knit Picks. I'm going to double check that. And then I'll put, some words here and tell you. I'm pretty sure it's Kotlin from Knit Picks. When the pattern was published, I believe Allison also did a sample in a wool yarn, but this is a cotton yarn. It is a bottom-up set-in sleeve sweater. It's just all over this sort of lacy, slightly open pattern. It's very comfortable. So today, right now, it's about 73 degrees. It's really breezy, so it's definitely not quite wool sweater weather. And I actually don't have a lot of non-wool projects just because knitting with the cotton is not my favorite. But this Kotlin is actually pretty soft, and this sweater is really comfortable. So you can see it's just a little bit see-through, so I have like a cami on underneath. I also have loose ends. And this is a great sort of transition project. 3/4 length, nice wide neck, cotton sweater for these very late summer, I still say it's early fall days. So sweater weather, Annapolis pullover, available in my Ravelry, Pay Hip, and Love Knitting shops. I know you're all going to be so surprised to hear I actually have something off the needles. Not really through any great commitment on my part, but because it was a test knit and there was a deadline. So since I am retiring from pattern design at the end of the year, something I would like to do next year is to start doing more test knitting. I hope maybe as a designer I bring a helpful perspective to other designers with their patterns. So I've been trying to get a couple of test knits in this year, kind of get in that testing mode. And I recently signed up for a test knit for Karina Spencer, who is one of my favorite designers. And I finished almost on time this project. This is called the Yellow Brick Cowlet. Is going to be published in October. I'm going to give you guys a close-up of this bottom part. You can see it is worked in a twisted rib with smocking that creates this sort of V-shaped chevron-y kind of deal around the bottom. So I used for this the leftovers from my Painted on the Sky top, which was a fingering weight merino mohair blend and a lace weight silk mohair blend. So this is a cowlet. It starts out knit flat the first bit. Then she has you join in the round. And so you can wear it all the way pulled down over your shoulders, or you can pull it up a little bit and then have it drape further down in the front and just kind of skim your shoulders. And then it just hangs in the back like that, because it is joined in the round. I actually, 4 rounds from the end, ran out of my fingering weight yarn. So I went stash diving and I just happened to find a purple mini skein that was not an exact match, but with held double with the mohair, it blended really well. And I think you can tell, but you can barely tell, especially from a distance. So you can definitely see it's not exactly the same shade of purple here as it is here, but it's pretty darn close. So this is a great project. The pattern is really clear and concise, and I really like her layout. She'll do like special call outs where you need to, make sure you're paying attention to something. But it was really clear and well written. And of course you can see that the first part is just kind of eyelet bands mixed with stockinette, so nothing super fancy. It's all the hard work is in the bottom. And so this is created by wrapping yarn around the stitches. That part, to be very honest, is a little tedious. There's really no way to make it go very fast. So you kind of just have to deal with it, slipping the yarn, slipping the stitches, wrapping the yarn around them, slipping them back. But the end result is worth it. So this is super soft because of the yarn. It's a great sort of TV knitting project for the first part because, like I said, it's all just this stockinette and eyelet bands, and that's really easy to keep track of. And then you get this really beautiful bottom border, and then you really have to pay attention to that. But it's actually just a small part of the project. So I am really happy with this. I'm really happy to have found a use for these, beautiful leftovers. This is that yarn from Fiber for the People that she, designed, that she dyed specifically for my Painted on the Sky top, so I definitely didn't want to waste it. Like I said, I did run out of the fingering weight yarn just a little bit before I should have, but overall I am really happy with this project. Obviously I can't link to it yet because it has not been published, but definitely keep your eye on Karina Spencer. Again, this is called the Yellow Brick Cowlet, and she'll be publishing it in October. Thank you all so much for joining me for episode 26 of the Hilo Stitch podcast. You can find links to everything that I talked about in the show notes at mediaperuana.com/Hilo-Stitch. A special thank you again to my Patreon patrons for supporting the podcast and the Media Peruana Designs business. If you are interested in supporting the podcast and getting some perks and behind the scenes and bonuses, you can find more information at patreon.com/mediaperuana. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Media Peruana. I will include a link to all of my pattern shops in the comment box below. You can find my patterns on Ravelry, Love Knitting, and Payhip. If you enjoyed the podcast, I hope you will like, comment, subscribe, all of that good stuff. It will help other people find the podcast, as well as all of the other content on my YouTube channel, which includes lots of free knitting tutorials. So thank you again for joining me, and I will see you next time.
My grandparents had a bar in South Baltimore near Patterson Park. Actually, it was really the Canton area. And they had this bar, moved into Prohibition times. They did bathtub gin upstairs. My father was the plug puller if they ended up getting raided. And so I don't know how old he was then. Let's see, he was born in 1925, 35, maybe he was 15 years old. So one day the place was popular because my grandmother served fresh fried hard crabs, made by hand, and people,
And also gin.
And also gin.
and
That
also-
may have had some.
and he didn't pull the plug in time.
What do you
And-
mean by pull the plug?
Bathtub
Oh,
gin
bathtub
is
gin.
literally what it sounds like.
Literally, that's how they
Is
made it.
gin made in the bathtub?
All right,
So he had to pull the plug to drain it before the cops
so
found
that's
it.
a bash. Like, it's done.
Yes.
Yeah.
That sucks.
But it was cheap to make.
Well,
So they,
It also
they
tasted
lost,
super good.
so they lost their liquor license. So
they also lost their bathtub license.
my grandfather was talking to his brother, and his brother said, "Well, all you have to do is go down to the liquor board, change your name, add a letter, take a letter out, whatever, and they'll give you a new liquor license."
During Prohibition.
Because you're
Because you-
selling illegal liquor.
But
No,
it's
no,
pro-
but
you-
if there's
illegal during
prohibition,
Prohibition.
all liquor is
You're
illegal.
saying
No,
That's
that's
So
not correct. That's not correct. They could still serve beer and certain wines.
Oh, so it's
Interesting.
literally just liquor
Just
was
hard,
the issue.
yes, hard
Okay.
liquor. So my grandfather went and he dropped the Z. So my father is the last one with the Z in his birth certificate and baptismal certificate.